My name is Cassidy Beaumont. I'm 39 years old. At 11:43 on a rainy Thursday night, my sister stood in the lobby of the Harbor Crest Hotel in Savannah, Georgia, with our father's funeral clothes folded over one arm, and said to the night manager, "There has to be some mistake. We have 6 rooms reserved." The manager looked at his screen, then at the credit card in her hand, then back at the screen. "I do see 6 rooms," he said carefully, "but they are all under Cassidy Beaumont's master account, and I cannot check anyone in without her authorization." The lobby smelled like wet luggage, lemon floor cleaner, and the bitter coffee hotels keep in silver urns after the restaurant closes. Behind my sister, my older brother Grant stood with his jaw tight and his phone pressed to his ear, calling me for the 9th time since their plane landed. My youngest sister, Melanie, sat on a velvet bench with her shoes off, rubbing her heel and crying loudly enough that strangers kept turning to look. My mother's sister, Aunt Celia, held a garment bag containing Dad's Navy suit and kept whispering, "This is not the time," though nobody seemed sure who she was saying it to. My brother's wife, Courtney, was at the rental car counter across the lobby, learning the same lesson from a different employee. "I'm sorry?" the rental agent said. "The reservation is prepaid, but Cassidy Beaumont is the named primary renter. We need your driver's license and card present or written authorization through the business travel portal." Courtney looked over at Grant. Grant looked at my sister. My sister looked at the front doors as if I might walk through them carrying forgiveness in one hand and their room keys in the other. I was not there. I was 2 states away in the Charlotte airport, sitting near gate B27 with my work tote under my feet, my phone on silent, and the last boarding pass my siblings had not waited for folded inside my father's old leather travel wallet. 3 hours earlier, they had boarded the plane without me. Not because I missed the flight, not because the gate had closed, because my work emergency ran late, my rideshare got stuck behind an accident on the interstate, and my family decided my delay was one more inconvenience they were tired of accommodating. Grant had called from the gate at 6:17 and said, "Cassidy, we are not holding up Dad's funeral because you can't leave the office on time." My sister Lauren had added in the background, loud enough for me to hear, "She always makes herself essential. Let her figure it out." I had been standing in the security line, still wearing my blazer from the client audit, holding Dad's travel wallet in one hand and the folder with every funeral confirmation in the other. I said, "I'm through security in 5 minutes. The flight does not board for another 12. Grant said, "We're getting on." Then Melanie texted, "Don't make this about you." At the gate, they boarded. The airline closed the doors. And for the first time in my life, I did not run after people who had already decided leaving me behind was easier than respecting what I carried. What they did not know was that every hotel room, every rental car, every airport shuttle, every funeral home appointment, every flower order, every restaurant reservation, every cemetery permit, and every prepaid family arrangement had been booked under my account because I was the one who had handled Dad's final documents for 3 years. They also did not know that Dad's will had named me executor, not Grant, not Lauren, not Melanie, me. Before I tell you what happened when my family arrived in Savannah and could not check into a single room, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there. Maybe you are sitting in an airport right now, or in a car outside work, or at your kitchen table with someone else's crisis sitting in your lap, because you have always been the person everyone expects to fix things. If you have ever been left out, blamed, or mocked by the same people who depend on your planning, leave a comment. And if stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and proof that speaks louder than excuses mean something to you, like this video and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Because this is that story. But before I tell you what I authorized and what I refused to authorize from Gate B27, I need to take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a brick ranch house with a cracked driveway, a screened porch, and a father who believed the trunk of a car should always contain jumper cables, a blanket, a flashlight, and paper maps. My dad, Howard Beaumont, was a high school history teacher for 36 years. He was not a loud man, but his quiet had weight. When he spoke, students listened. When he paused, even my mother stopped rearranging the room. My mother died when I was 22. Breast cancer, 13 months from diagnosis to funeral. After that, Dad became both softer and more particular. He labeled leftovers. He kept birthday cards in chronological order. He wrote passwords in a notebook he hid so obviously in his desk drawer that all of us knew where it was, but pretended not to. He ironed his own shirts every Sunday evening while listening to baseball on the radio. There were 4 of us Beaumont children. Grant was the oldest, 5 years ahead of me, and carried himself like birth order was a military rank. He became a mortgage broker, bought a house with stone columns, and developed the habit of saying, from a practical standpoint, before explaining why someone else should do something inconvenient. Then came Lauren, 3 years older than me, polished, sharp, and allergic to being inconvenienced. She worked in corporate communications and had the gift of making selfish decisions sound like brand strategy. Lauren could forget your birthday and then explain that expectations were unhealthy. I was third. Then Melanie, 6 years younger than me, the baby of the family, tender when she wanted something, and helpless whenever responsibility entered the room. Melanie was not cruel in the beginning. She had been 11 when Mom died, and we all made allowances for her grief. The problem was that allowances, if never ended, become architecture. After Mom died, roles settled around us like assigned seating. Grant became the man of the family, at least in speeches. Lauren became the one with opinions. Melanie became the fragile one. I became the reliable one. Reliable meant I drove Dad to follow-up appointments, while Grant sent articles about grieving. Reliable meant I filled out insurance forms while Lauren criticized the font on the memorial program. Reliable meant I helped Melanie apply to colleges because she cried over essay prompts and Dad could not bear seeing her cry. Reliable meant when something had to be done correctly, quietly, and without applause, it came to me. My symbolic object was Dad's leather travel wallet. It was dark brown, soft at the corners, with a brass snap that clicked only if you pressed it exactly right. He had bought it in Savannah on his honeymoon with Mom and used it for every trip after. Boarding passes, hotel confirmations, cash, emergency phone numbers, folded maps, receipts from roadside diners, one small photo of Mom at 28 standing near a fountain in Forsyth Park. When I was little, I thought it was magical because every time Dad opened it, the trip became organized. When I was older, I realized the magic was preparation. Dad gave it to me after his first stroke. He was 72 then, retired for 4 years, still sharp, but suddenly aware that the body can become unreliable before the mind is ready. I was 36, working as compliance manager for a regional medical billing company, which meant my days were built around audits, forms, deadlines, and people who thought rules were suggestions until fines arrived. Dad called me one Saturday morning and said, "Cass, come by when you can. I want to go over some things." That was Dad's way, no drama, just some things. I found him at the kitchen table with 3 folders, a pen, his reading glasses, and the leather travel wallet placed in the center like a small relic. "Are you sick?" I asked. "I am old," he said. "Different category." "Dad." I had a warning. I listened. The folders were labeled medical, legal, and funeral. He had made the labels himself with a label maker that printed slightly crooked tape. I sat across from him while the refrigerator hummed and a mourning dove called somewhere outside the porch. He showed me his advance directive, his power of attorney, his updated will, his bank contact list, his life insurance policy, his prepaid cemetery plot next to Mom's in Savannah, because that was where her family was buried and where he had promised her he would rest too. He had already chosen a funeral home, St. Bartholomew's Chapel, and a modest service with hymns Mom loved. "Grant should have copies," I said. Dad shook his head. Grant will talk over the forms. Lauren will edit them. Melanie will cry on them. I almost smiled. And me? You'll read them. That was not flattery. It was fact. He slid the leather travel wallet toward me. You take this when the time comes. Dad. Cassidy. I hated when he used my full name, because it meant he would not be moved. He continued. There is cash inside for small things. A copy of my ID, the cemetery contact, and your mother's photo. Do not let them turn this into a performance. I looked at him. Who? He gave me a tired smile. You know who. I did, but I wanted not to. For 3 years, I handled what Dad called the unromantic mercy of preparation. I renewed documents. I scanned records. I kept copies in a cloud folder Grant never opened after asking for access. I called the funeral home annually to confirm the prepaid arrangements. I updated Dad's medication list. I paid bills when he was hospitalized. I arranged home care after his second stroke. I sat with him through cardiology appointments, while Lauren texted for updates she could summarize to relatives as if she had been present. Grant came when decisions were visible. Lauren came when conversations could be curated. Melanie came when she needed to be comforted. I came when the pharmacy was closing in 20 minutes and Dad's blood thinner had not been refilled. I do not say that to sound noble. I say it because unglamorous love counts, even when families pretend only speeches do. Dad noticed. That helped. Not enough to prevent the damage, but enough to keep me from believing their version entirely. One night, after a long appointment where the neurologist explained swallowing risks, Dad and I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot. Rain moved down the windshield in thin lines. He was tired. His left hand curled slightly in his lap, the way it did after the second stroke. You are angry, he said. I am not. You drive differently when you are angry. I stared at the steering wheel. Grant said I was overcomplicating your care plan. Dad made a small sound. Grant thinks instructions are criticism. Lauren said I should delegate. Lauren thinks delegation means naming who failed after she leaves. I laughed despite myself. Then he said, do not let them make you mean. That sentence stayed with me. I asked, what if they mistake kindness for availability? Then become less available, not cruel. It took me years to understand the difference. My siblings had always treated my work as less real than theirs because mine made less noise. Grant had client meetings, Lauren had campaigns, Melanie had feelings, I had systems. Systems do not get sympathy. When Dad fell again in January, I was the one who got the call from his neighbor, Mrs. Velasquez. I left a quarterly compliance review, drove across town, met the ambulance, signed paperwork, and sat beside Dad in the emergency room while he slept with a bruise forming along his cheekbone. I texted the siblings. Grant replied, keep us posted. Lauren replied, can you ask if this changes travel plans for March? We need to know. Melanie replied, I can't handle this right now. I looked at the 3 messages and felt something inside me step back. Not break, step back. Dad recovered enough to come home with more help, but we all knew the next chapter had begun. I arranged a visiting nurse, meal deliveries, medication packaging, a shower chair, and a fall monitor. Grant questioned costs. Lauren questioned communication. Melanie questioned why nobody had told her in a gentler way. At a family meeting in Dad's living room, Grant stood near the fireplace and said, Cassidy, you have to stop making unilateral decisions. I was sitting beside Dad's recliner with his medication binder on my lap. Which decision? The nurse schedule, the meal thing, the monitor. Dad approved them. Grant looked at Dad. Dad looked at him over his glasses. I did. Lauren said, we just want transparency. I opened the folder. I emailed everyone the care plan, estimates, vendor contacts, and billing schedule. Lauren glanced at her phone. I get a lot of email. Melanie, sitting on the couch under Mom's quilt, said, "It just feels like you're taking over." Dad's mouth tightened. I said, "Someone has to manage the details." Grant replied, "You don't have to martyr yourself." There it was, the family's favorite reversal. Let Cassidy do the work, then accuse her of enjoying the burden. Dad said, "Enough." The room went quiet because Dad rarely used that tone. He looked at Grant, then Lauren, then Melanie. "Your sister is not taking over. She is showing up." No one answered. I looked down at the medication schedule because if I looked at Dad, I might cry. That was the last time he defended me in front of all of them. He died on a Monday morning in early October. Not dramatically. Not in pain. He died in his bed, with sunlight on the quilt and Mrs. Velasquez holding his hand because she had stopped by with banana bread and found him breathing strangely. I was 12 minutes away when she called. I arrived before the funeral home, before the nurse, before my siblings answered their phones. Dad was already gone. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at him. His face was peaceful in a way that made me angry. Not at him, at time, at the body, at all the small arrangements we make while pretending love can delay the inevitable if we organize well enough. The leather travel wallet was in his nightstand, exactly where he had told me it would be. I took it because he had asked me to. Then I sat beside him and held his hand until the nurse arrived. Grant answered on the third call. "What happened?" "Dad died." Silence. "Then when?" "This morning. Mrs. Velasquez found him." "Were you there?" "No." His breath changed. I knew what he was about to do before he did it. Why wasn't the morning aide there? "She comes at 10. Mrs. Velasquez came at 8. "I thought you said he had coverage." "He did not have 24-hour coverage because you objected to the cost." He said nothing. "Then this isn't the time." "No," I said, "it isn't." Lauren cried when I told her, but within 4 minutes she asked whether Dad had left funeral instructions. Melanie screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away, then asked if I could call her therapist because she could not explain it herself. I did all the things. I called the funeral home in Savannah. I notified the cemetery. I contacted St. Bartholomew's. I ordered certified copies of the death certificate. I notified Dad's attorney. I contacted his pension office. I booked flights for everyone. I reserved hotel rooms near the chapel. I booked rental cars. I arranged airport pickup as backup. I ordered flowers from the same florist Dad used for Mom. I arranged a small family dinner after the service. I confirmed the obituary with the Savannah paper. I sent everyone the itinerary in a shared document, a PDF, and individual texts because they always claimed they had missed one format. Grant responded, "Looks good." Lauren responded, "Can we make the dinner restaurant less depressing?" Melanie responded, "Do I have to speak at the service?" No one asked how I was. That was not new. But grief removed some of the padding around old injuries. The funeral trip was scheduled for Thursday through Sunday. The service would be Friday afternoon at St. Bartholomew's, burial afterward at Bonaventure, dinner at a private room near the river. Dad had prepaid the basics, but because families expand around death like spilled water, I covered additional rooms, rental cars, meals, flowers, printed programs, and travel changes through my credit card and estate reimbursement process. Everything was under my name because I had the accounts, the documents, the executor authority, and the mental list of what had been done. That was the practical reason. The emotional reason was simpler. They had never carried the clipboard. They only argued with the person holding it. The day of the flight, I went to work because a federal audit response was due by noon. I had planned to leave by 3, go home, change, pick up the funeral folder, and get to the airport by 5:15 for our 7 o'clock flight. I had built in time. I always built in time. Then a client file failed validation at 11:40. By 1, legal needed my review. By 2:30, The compliance director asked me to stay on a call with the external auditors because I was the only person who knew the timeline. I texted the family group. Work emergency. Still on track, but tight. I have all confirmations and Dad's documents. Please wait near gate if I'm close. Grant replied, "This is why you should have taken the whole day off." Lauren replied, "We all have jobs." Melanie replied, "I can't do airport stress today." I did not answer. At 4:50, I ran from the office carrying my work tote, suitcase, funeral folder, and Dad's travel wallet. Rain had started, cold and slanted. My ride-share driver missed the building entrance, circled twice, then got stuck behind an accident on the interstate. I watched the arrival time climb from 5:20 to 5:40 to 6:02. I texted updates. "Security line showing short. I will make boarding." No response. At 6:12, I reached the terminal. I ran, as much as a woman in heels with a suitcase and a grief headache can run. The departures hall smelled like pretzels, wet coats, and burned espresso. I checked my bag because the funeral garment bag had liquids from Melanie's toiletries she had asked me to bring. Then I went through security, where a man ahead of me argued about a pocket knife. At 6:17, Grant called. "We're boarding." "I'm in security. I can see the end. I'll be there." "You said you'd be here earlier." "I know. Work emergency." Lauren's voice came through. We all knew she'd make this dramatic. I closed my eyes. "I am not being dramatic. The flight leaves at 7. Boarding just started." Grant said, "Dad's funeral is not your office meeting, Cassidy." "I have Dad's documents." Then text pictures. That's not how hotel check-in or funeral authorization works. Lauren laughed in the background. She loves being needed. I moved forward in line. "Wait at the gate." Grant said, "We're not missing our flight because you can't manage time." Then Melanie texted, "Don't make this about you." I looked at the message while standing barefoot on the security mat, my shoes in a gray bin, Dad's travel wallet in my hand. Something became very quiet inside me. The TSA officer said, "Ma'am, step forward." I stepped forward. By 6:33, I was through security. At 6:39, I reached the gate. The door was closed. The jet bridge was empty. The gate agent looked at my boarding pass and winced before she spoke. "I'm sorry. The aircraft door is closed." "The flight doesn't leave for 21 minutes. "I know. But once the door is closed, we cannot reopen it." I looked through the window at the plane. My family was inside. They had not waited. They had not even tried. I stood there with my suitcase, my folder, and my father's travel wallet, watching rain move down the airport glass. For a moment, the old version of me rose up. The one who would call, explain, apologize, solve, absorb, and reassure. The one who would pay to fix a wound someone else had created, and then thank them for letting her. Then Dad's voice came back. "Do not let them make you mean. Become less available, not cruel." I turned to the gate agent. "What is the next flight to Savannah?" She typed quickly, "No direct tonight. I can get you to Charlotte. Overnight there, then Savannah by 9:40 tomorrow morning. The service is tomorrow afternoon. You would make it if there are no delays. Book it. There may be a fare difference." "That's fine." I stepped aside while she worked. My phone began vibrating. Grant, Lauren, Grant again. I let it ring. The gate agent handed me a new boarding pass. Her name tag said Priya. She looked at my face and softened. "Family emergency?" she asked. "My father's funeral." Her hand paused. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She hesitated. "Do you need to call someone?" I looked at my phone lighting up again. "No," I said. "They have my number." I found a seat near the window. Then I opened the shared itinerary and removed everyone's editing access. Not access to read, just editing. Then I opened the hotel portal. 6 rooms. Harbor Crest Hotel. 2 nights. Master account under Cassidy Beaumont. Authorized guests listed, but check-in required account holder authorization or a digital approval link sent from my email. I left it unchanged. I opened the rental car portal. 2 SUVs. Prepaid. Primary renter Cassidy Beaumont. Additional drivers could be added in person with my approval. I left it unchanged. I opened the funeral home email. Appointment Friday morning at 10:30 to review final documents, confirm casket flowers, sign transport authorization, and release the obituary program. Executor required. I left it unchanged. Then I texted the family group. I missed the flight because the door closed. I am rebooked through Charlotte and arrive tomorrow morning. All arrangements remain as scheduled. Grant replied immediately, "You should have been on time." Lauren replied, "Unbelievable." Melanie replied, "I feel sick." I typed, "I'm sure the hotel can explain check-in procedures when you arrive." Then I put my phone on silent. I did not turn it off. That would have been dramatic. I simply stopped feeding the machine. At 8:10, I boarded the Charlotte flight. I sat by the window beside a college student who slept with his hood over his face. The plane rose through rain into dark cloud, and Columbus disappeared below me. I held Dad's travel wallet the entire flight, thumb resting on the brass snap. Inside was Mom's photo. I opened it once. She was standing in Forsyth Park in a yellow sundress, smiling at something outside the frame. Dad had written on the back, "Evelyn, Savannah, first trip," still saying I packed too much. I smiled despite everything. He had packed exactly enough. In Charlotte, the airport was half asleep. Fluorescent lights. Floor polish. A cleaning cart squeaking near an empty gate. I bought a bottle of water and a turkey sandwich I did not want. My phone had 17 missed calls, 11 texts, and 1 voicemail from Grant, with no words, only lobby noise and someone saying my name sharply in the background. I read the texts in order. Grant, hotel says you need to authorize. Lauren, Cassidy, answer your phone. Melanie, this is cruel. Courtney, rental car won't release keys. Can you send something? Grant, stop being petty. Lauren, Dad would be ashamed. That one almost worked. Not because it was true, because grief makes you vulnerable to familiar weapons. I opened Dad's travel wallet and touched the edge of Mom's photo. Then I called the Harbor Crest Hotel. The night manager answered, "Harbor Crest, this is Julian." "Hello, Julian. This is Cassidy Beaumont. I believe my family is there trying to check in under my reservation." There was a pause. "Yes, Ms. Beaumont. We have several members of the Beaumont party in the lobby. I'm delayed due to a missed connection. I will arrive tomorrow morning. I want to authorize 1 room tonight for my Aunt Celia Beaumont because she is carrying my father's funeral clothes and she has a medical condition. Please place her in the accessible king room if available." Understood. No other rooms are to be released under my master account tonight without my digital authorization. Another pause. "Yes, ma'am. If they want separate rooms, they may book and pay independently if you have availability. We are fully committed tonight except the reserved block." "I understand." Julian's voice lowered slightly. "Would you like me to communicate that to them?" "Yes, please do so politely." "Of course." I added, "Please do not discuss my account details beyond check-in authorization." Understood. Then I called the rental agency. I authorized 1 compact car for Aunt Celia in the morning, if she needed it. no SUVs. Then I called the funeral home voicemail and left a message confirming I would be there before the 10:30 appointment and that no changes were authorized without me. After that, I texted Aunt Celia directly. I authorized your room. Please check in with Julian. Dad's suit should stay with you. I arrive tomorrow morning. She replied 3 minutes later. Thank you. This is a terrible mess. I told them not to board. I looked at that message for a long time. Someone had said it. Not loudly enough to stop them, maybe, but she had said it. I wrote back, get some sleep. Then I stretched my legs across my suitcase in the Charlotte airport and slept for 42 minutes with Dad's travel wallet under my hand. I need to pause here for a moment. If you have ever been the person everyone leaves behind emotionally but expects to arrive with a plan, then you know what that airport felt like. It was not about a plane. It was about years of being treated like the backup system for people who mocked the system until it failed them. If this story feels familiar, leave a comment and tell me when you stopped rushing after people who abandoned you first. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some truths do not need shouting. They need confirmation numbers. The next morning, my flight to Savannah left at 7:28. I watched sunrise through the airport windows, pale pink over the runway. I had washed my face in the restroom, changed into black trousers and a soft gray sweater, and pinned my hair back with the only clip in my bag. I looked tired. I looked like a daughter going to bury her father after sleeping in an airport chair. I also looked calm. At 9:36, I landed in Savannah. My phone lit up the moment it reconnected. Grant, we need to talk before funeral home. Lauren, you made Melanie sleep in the lobby. That was not true. Melanie had slept in Aunt Celia's room after crying hard enough that Aunt Celia gave up the second bed. Melanie, I can't believe you would do this during Dad's funeral. Courtney, please call. Everyone is upset. Aunt Celia, I have the suit. I am downstairs having coffee. Come straight here. I did not answer the siblings. I picked up my suitcase and walked to the rental counter. The agent checked my license, card, and confirmation. Within 12 minutes, I had the keys to one of the prepaid SUVs. The second SUV remained unreleased because I had not authorized it. When I pulled up to the Harbor Crest Hotel at 10:12, the sky was blue and the sidewalks still damp from overnight rain. Spanish moss hung from the live oaks along the street. The hotel was old brick, polished brass, green awnings. The kind of place Lauren would have chosen for photographs if she had done anything besides critique the itinerary. Aunt Celia was waiting near the entrance with Dad's garment bag. She was my mother's older sister, 71, tall, with white hair cut short and an expression that had frightened rude bank tellers for decades. She hugged me with one arm because the garment bag was in the other. I am sorry, she said into my shoulder. I closed my eyes. Thank you. She pulled back. Your siblings are upstairs in my room, rotating showers and resentment. Despite everything, I laughed once. Where is Dad's suit? With me, I guarded it like crown jewels. I appreciate that. She looked at me closely. You should eat. I will after the funeral home. No, you will eat now. I did not argue with Aunt Celia before coffee. Julian, the night manager, was still at the desk, looking as if he had not slept much either. When I approached, he straightened. Ms. Beaumont. Thank you for your help last night. You're welcome. I'm sorry for your loss. His sincerity almost undid me. Thank you. He slid a packet across the desk. I have your rooms ready for check-in. We held the block. I'll just need your signature on the master folio. I signed. Then I said, please issue keys for all rooms to me only. I will distribute them. Of course. The printer hummed. Behind me, the elevator dinged. Grant, Lauren, Melanie, and Courtney stepped into the lobby. No one spoke at first. Grant looked rumpled in a way I had never seen. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair flat on one side. Lauren wore yesterday's blouse and fury-like armor. Melanie's eyes were swollen. Courtney looked exhausted and embarrassed. Dane did not exist in this family, but if he had, he would have said something unhelpful. Grant came forward first. Cassidy. Grant. We need room keys. I know. Lauren crossed her arms. You let us sit down here for 2 hours last night. I authorized Aunt Celia's room. You know what I mean. I do. Melanie's voice shook. I slept in a chair. Aunt Celia said, You slept in my room after taking the bed by the window. Melanie looked wounded. That is not the point. I turned to her. What is the point? You punished us. No, I said. I allowed the reservations to function exactly as booked, under my account. Grant's jaw tightened. This is Dad's funeral. Yes. And you're making it about control. I opened my tote and removed the travel wallet. Grant's eyes moved to it. Dad's wallet had that effect. No, I said. Dad made me responsible for the arrangements. You left the person responsible at the airport. Lauren laughed bitterly. You were late. I was at the gate 21 minutes before departure. The door had closed because you boarded, instead of asking the gate agent to wait for a passenger already through security. That is not how flights work, Grant said. I know how flights work. I also know how families work when they are trying. Courtney looked down. Aunt Celia made a soft approving sound behind me. Julian placed the key packets on the counter. 6 envelopes. I picked them up. Lauren reached for one. I held them back. Before I hand these out, listen carefully. I am going to the funeral home in 6 minutes. The appointment is at 10:30. I am the executor and the authorized contact. No one changes the service. Flowers, obituaries, seating, music, cemetery timing, dinner reservation, or transportation without me. Grant scoffed. You love saying executor. I looked at him. I do not love any part of this. That quieted him for half a second. Then Lauren said, Dad would have wanted us all involved. I opened the funeral folder. Dad wrote what he wanted. I am following it. Melanie wiped her eyes. He wanted Amazing Grace. Yes, it is in the program. I told you that last week. No, I said. Dad wrote it 3 years ago. Her face flushed. Grant looked at the key envelopes. Just give us the rooms. I handed one to Aunt Celia first, then one to Courtney, not Grant. Courtney looked surprised. You and Grant are in 414, I said. Lauren and Melanie are in 416. Aunt Celia is in the Accessible King. I have the room across from Dad's suite until the service. The remaining rooms are for cousins arriving at noon. Lauren snapped. You put me with Melanie? Yes. I requested my own room. You requested many things after I booked the block. This is unbelievable. Then book your own room. Julian looked at his screen and said, professionally, we are sold out tonight. I could have hugged him. Lauren's mouth closed. I gave her the key. Then I turned and walked toward the doors. Grant followed. We are not done. I stopped near the lobby vase, where white lilies had begun to open. We are done until after Dad is buried. You don't get to decide that. I looked at him. I actually do. That is what you are struggling with. I left before he could answer. The funeral home was 12 minutes away, in a quiet street lined with oaks and old houses with deep porches. Mercer and Lowe funeral services had a black door, brass handles, and planters filled with white mums. I arrived at 10:27. The director, Mr. Samuel Lowe, met me in the front hall. He was in his 60s, with dark skin, silver hair, and a voice so steady it made the room feel less breakable. Miss Beaumont, he said, taking my hand, I am very sorry about your father. Thank you. We have everything prepared according to his file. I understand there were travel complications. Yes. He did not ask for details. That was mercy. We sat in a consultation room with pale walls, a mahogany table, tissues in a ceramic box, and a clock that ticked softly enough to be respectful. Aunt Celia joined us with Dad's suit. My siblings arrived 15 minutes late, which I did not mention because the universe has a sense of structure. Grant sat opposite me. Lauren sat beside him, arms crossed. Melanie sat near Aunt Celia, already crying. Mr. Lowe opened Dad's file. Mr. Howard Beaumont prepaid for a chapel service, burial at Bonaventure Cemetery beside his wife, Evelyn, and selected several preferences, which Ms. Beaumont confirmed earlier this week. Grant leaned forward. We may want to adjust a few things. Mr. Lowe looked at him politely. Certainly. Any changes would need to be consistent with Mr. Beaumont's written instructions and authorized by the executor. Grant's eyes moved to me. I said nothing. Lauren said, the obituary is too plain. Dad was more than a teacher. We should mention his community awards. I opened the folder. Dad wrote the obituary himself. Melanie sniffed. He did? Yes. I slid a copy across the table. It was in Dad's voice. Brief, clear, humble. Beloved teacher, husband of Evelyn, father of Grant, Lauren, Cassidy, and Melanie. Grandfather to 2, friend to many, lifelong reader, poor fisherman, stubborn gardener. In lieu of flowers, donations to the school library fund. Lauren read it and looked away. Grant said, the service should include family remarks. Dad requested no open eulogies. That doesn't sound like him. Aunt Celia snorted. It sounds exactly like him. Howard hated unsupervised microphones. Despite myself, I smiled. Mr. Lowe looked down, hiding his own smile professionally. Melanie whispered, but I wanted to say something. I softened because Melanie's grief was real, even when wrapped in selfishness. You can write something and place it in the casket with him, I said. Mr. Lowe said we can do that before the service. She nodded, crying harder but quieter. Grant said, I'm the eldest son. I should speak. I looked at him. Dad specifically wrote no eulogies. You're hiding behind paperwork. No, I am honoring it. Mr. Lowe turned a page. The executor's role is to ensure the decedent's written wishes are followed. Lauren's mouth tightened. Everyone keeps using that word. Executor? I asked. Like it makes you queen of grief. I looked at her for a long moment. I would trade the title for Dad being alive. That ended that. The meeting continued. Casket flowers. Program proof. Service order. Cemetery timing. Transportation. Family seating. Death certificates. Estate contact. Every item had a document, signature, or confirmation. Each time someone tried to adjust something based on feeling, Mr. Lowe asked, Ms. Beaumont? Each time I checked Dad's folder, not my preference, Dad's. By the end, Grant looked less angry and more displaced. Lauren looked like she was realizing her ability to shape narratives had run into a signed instruction sheet. Melanie looked tired enough to become honest. As we stood to leave, Mr. Lowe handed me the final service packet. Everything is in order, he said. Grant muttered, because Cassidy always has a folder. I turned. Yes, I said. And today you are benefiting from it. The words landed quietly. Aunt Celia said amen. The service was beautiful, not grand, not dramatic. Beautiful because it was exactly what Dad had asked for. St. Bartholomew's Chapel had pale stone walls, dark wooden pews, and stained glass windows that turned the afternoon light blue and gold. The air smelled like old wood, lilies, and candle wax. Dad's navy suit fit him well, because Aunt Celia had guarded it. Mom's photo was tucked inside the casket, beneath his folded hands. in the leather travel wallet for one final moment before I removed the wallet and kept the photo with him, as he had written. The hymns were simple. The pastor spoke about Dad's years as a teacher, his love of history, his dry humor, and his devotion to Mom. No one gave speeches. No one performed grief. Melanie placed a letter in the casket. Grant stood stiffly. Lauren cried silently into a tissue. Aunt Celia held my hand during the final prayer. At the cemetery, Spanish moss moved softly in the wind. Dad was buried beside Mom beneath a live oak. The marker already bore Mom's name, and Dad's would be added below. The ground was damp from earlier rain. My heels sank slightly into the grass. A cardinal called somewhere beyond the graves. When it was over, I stayed after everyone else began walking toward the cars. Grant waited beside the path. For once, he did not rush me. I touched the top of Mom's stone, then the temporary marker for Dad. "I did it right," I whispered. Aunt Celia heard me. "Yes," she said. "You did." The dinner afterward was in a private room at a restaurant near the river. Long table, white cloth, low flowers, warm bread, soft light. I had chosen it because Dad and Mom had eaten there once on an anniversary trip and saved the receipt in the travel wallet. The restaurant had changed names twice since then, but the building was the same. At first, everyone behaved. Grief can discipline people temporarily. Cousins told stories. Aunt Celia described Dad trying to assemble a tent in the rain on a camping trip. Melanie laughed through tears. Lauren corrected a date and then apologized when Aunt Celia raised one eyebrow. Grant drank water, not whiskey, which I noticed. After dessert, the server brought the bill folder to me. Not Grant, not the eldest son, me. The family saw it. I placed Dad's estate card inside and signed the receipt. Grant looked at the travel wallet beside my plate. "Did Dad really ask you to handle everything?" I looked at him. Yes. Why didn't he tell us? "He tried. You all changed the subject." Lauren looked down. Melanie whispered, "I didn't know about the wallet." "He gave it to me after his stroke." Grant reached toward it, then stopped. "Can I see it?" I hesitated. Then I opened it and removed Mom's photo, the old receipt, and Dad's folded instruction note. I passed the wallet to Grant. He held it carefully, not like property, like something he had not earned but had been allowed to touch. His face changed as he rubbed his thumb over the worn leather. "I remember this," he said. "We all do," Lauren said quietly. "I thought you just liked being in charge." I looked at her. "I know." She flinched. "I'm sorry." It was the first direct apology of the trip. Not enough, but direct. Melanie wiped her eyes. "I was scared," she said. "I know." "I still shouldn't have texted that." "No." "I'm sorry." Grant kept looking at the wallet. "I thought if we waited, we'd miss the plane." "You would not have." He nodded slowly. "I know that now." "No, Grant. You knew it then. You just decided I was acceptable collateral." The room grew quiet. He looked up. That sentence hurt him. It was supposed to. Not cruelly. Accurately. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed he was sorry for the hotel. For the embarrassment. For the inconvenience turning around on him. I did not yet know if he was sorry for the pattern, so I said thank you. He looked as if he expected more. I gave him nothing else. After dinner, I drove Aunt Celia back to the hotel. My siblings rode in the shuttle I had arranged and did not thank me until the next morning, when checkout required my signature again, and everyone suddenly remembered politeness. The trip ended Sunday. I changed the return seating, so I flew alone. Grant noticed at the airport, "You're not on our flight?" "I am. Different row." "Why?" "Because I want quiet." Lauren said, "Cassidy, we apologized." "Yes." Melanie looked wounded again, but less theatrically. Grant said, "So what? You're punishing us forever?" I looked at the departures board, flights blinking, cities changing, families moving around us with bags, coffee, strollers, flowers, grief, ordinary impatience. "No," I said. "I am traveling home in the seat I chose." Then I walked to my gate. The aftermath of a funeral is strange. People expect grief to be the hard part, but sometimes grief is clean compared to administration. Death certificates, bank appointments, pension forms, estate notices, house cleanout, donation receipts, memorial thank you cards, changing the utility names, canceling subscriptions. Finding Dad's handwriting on a grocery list months after he is gone. I handled the estate because Dad had asked me to. This time, I charged the estate for reimbursable expenses properly. I did not float costs indefinitely to keep everyone comfortable. I sent monthly summaries to my siblings. Short, factual, documented. Grant replied less often after realizing there was nothing to argue with. Lauren suggested edits to the memorial thank you note. I used 2 and ignored 6. Melanie asked if she could have Mom's quilt. Dad's will had left it to her. I mailed it with tracking and insured delivery. I kept the travel wallet. That was in the will, too. The first real family reckoning came 3 months later at Dad's house, when we met with his attorney to review remaining estate items. Mr. Whitcomb was an old friend of Dad's, with bushy eyebrows and a habit of tapping papers into alignment before reading them. We sat around Dad's dining table, the same table where we had eaten meatloaf, birthday cake, Thanksgiving stuffing, and cold pizza after Mom's funeral. Mr. Whitcomb read the final personal property list. Grant received Dad's watch and military history collection. Lauren received Mom's pearl earrings and the dining room hutch. Melanie received the quilt and Dad's music box. I received the travel wallet, Dad's desk, and the remaining administrative records. Grant said, "Administrative records?" Mr. Whitcomb looked over his glasses. "Your father wrote, 'Cassidy will know what to do with them.'" Lauren gave a sad little laugh. "He knew us." "Yes," I said, "he did." Then Mr. Whitcomb removed one sealed envelope. This was to be read after the funeral arrangements were completed. He handed it to me. My name was on the front in Dad's handwriting. Cass. My hands shook when I opened it. The letter was brief. Cass. "If this is being read, then you did the hard parts. I am sorry I gave you so many of them. I know your brother and sisters love me. I also know love without responsibility can leave the responsible person very tired. Do not carry what is not yours after I am gone. Keep the wallet. Take your mother's photo if you want it. Go somewhere with no itinerary for a few days. You were a good daughter before you became useful. Remember that." Dad, I read the last line twice. "You were a good daughter before you became useful." I had to put the paper down. Melanie cried openly. Lauren covered her mouth. Grant looked at the table. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Grant said, "He saw it." "Yes," I said. Lauren whispered, "Why didn't he say it to us?" Aunt Celia, who had come as witness because she trusted none of us completely, answered from the corner, "He did. You didn't like the phrasing." That was Aunt Celia, a lighthouse with earrings. After that letter, something shifted. Not magically, not fully, but enough that my siblings could no longer pretend the funeral trip had been an isolated misunderstanding. Grant asked me for lunch a month later. I almost said no. Then I went, because less available did not mean sealed shut. We met at a small deli near his office. He arrived on time, which I noticed. He ordered soup and did not take a phone call during the meal, which I also noticed. "I've been thinking about what Dad wrote," he said. "Okay. I made you the logistics person so I didn't have to feel guilty about being absent." I looked at him. "That is the first accurate sentence you've said about it." He smiled without humor. "Fair." He apologized again. This time, not for the hotel, not for the airport, for years. For calling my competence control, for asking for updates instead of showing up, for treating Dad's care like something I had claimed, rather than something he had avoided. I accepted the apology as a beginning, not a conclusion. Lauren's apology came in writing because Lauren trusted writing more than vulnerability. It was surprisingly honest. She said she had resented that Dad trusted me because it made her feel peripheral, and instead of earning trust, she criticized the way I held it. She said leaving me at the airport had been cruel and convenient. She said she had called me dramatic because she was afraid the truth made her look small. I wrote back, "Thank you for saying this." Melanie's change was messier. She still cried easily. She still needed reassurance. But one day, when I was sorting Dad's books, she arrived with boxes, tape, labels, and coffee. "I can help for 3 hours," she said. I looked at her. "Can you?" She nodded. I set a timer. It was such a Melanie sentence that I almost laughed, but she stayed the whole 3 hours. She sorted books by category, cried only once, and asked before keeping anything. Progress does not always look dignified. Sometimes it looks like a younger sister labeling a box, Civil War, heavy, and not making you carry it. A year after Dad's funeral, I took the trip he told me to take. No itinerary. Well, almost no itinerary. I am still myself. I flew to Savannah alone, not for a funeral, not for documents, not for anyone else's schedule. I stayed at a small inn near Forsyth Park, not the Harbor Crest. I carried Dad's travel wallet in my tote. Inside it were Mom's photo, Dad's letter, and one folded blank page. On the second morning, I walked to the fountain where Mom had stood in the yellow sundress. The air smelled like magnolia and damp stone. Tourists took photos. A little boy chased pigeons. A woman in a red scarf sat on a bench reading a book. I stood near the fountain and opened the wallet. For years, that wallet had meant responsibility. Boarding passes, confirmations, emergency cash. The next thing to handle. That morning, for the first time, it meant inheritance in the truest sense. Not money, not property, a way of moving through the world prepared, but not owned by everyone else's urgency. I took out the blank page and wrote one sentence. I am allowed to arrive for myself. Then I folded it and placed it behind Mom's photo. That afternoon, I visited Dad and Mom's grave. The marker had been updated. Howard Beaumont beneath Evelyn Beaumont. Same stone, same oak. Spanish moss moving lightly above them. I told Dad I had done what he asked. I told Mom I missed her. Then I told both of them I was done carrying roles that had been assigned when I was too young to refuse them. It felt less like a declaration and more like setting down a suitcase. My siblings are still my siblings. Grant still likes to sound authoritative. Lauren still edits reality when nervous. Melanie still needs more tenderness than she sometimes gives. But they call differently now. They ask if I have capacity before handing me tasks. They send information instead of vague anxiety. They thank me without turning gratitude into a joke. When they forget, I remind them once. Only once. The travel wallet sits in my desk drawer now. Not hidden, not displayed, kept. Sometimes, before a difficult meeting, I press the brass snap and hear Dad's voice telling me not to let them turn things into a performance. I have learned that revenge does not have to dishonor grief. In fact, the cleanest revenge can protect it. I did not strand my family. They stranded me. I did not cancel Dad's funeral. I preserved it. I did not make the hotel refuse them. I allowed the reservations to remain under the person who had made them. I did not humiliate my siblings. I let them experience, for one night, the weight of the work they had mocked. There is a difference. For years, they called me controlling because I knew where the documents were. They called me dramatic because I cared about details before details became emergencies. They called me essential only when they needed something, and exhausting when I reminded them what that something required. But the truth is simple. People who do not carry the plan should be careful about abandoning the person who does. That night at the Harbor Crest Hotel, my siblings learned that logistics are not invisible just because someone else handles them. Hotel rooms do not appear out of grief. Rental cars do not unlock because you are upset. Funeral homes do not release arrangements because the loudest person in the family says eldest son. Paperwork has a memory. Accounts have names. Authorization matters. So does respect. And when my family boarded that plane without me, they thought they were leaving behind the late sister. They were leaving behind the key. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Stories like this are not really about airports, hotels, rental cars, or funeral folders. They are about the women who quietly hold families together, then get blamed for caring too much by the very people who refuse to carry anything. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about family betrayal, quiet women, silent comebacks, and the documents that finally speak. And tell me, if your family left you behind while depending on every reservation in your name, would you rush to rescue them, or would you let the front desk explain who really held the plan?